So I've had experience of investment. As I touched on, my first business, I had very early investment with that. So I was actually part of a TV show and one investment, so say. So I had investment from the founders of Innocent Smoothies.
Mm-hmm.
I think investment can be a poison chalice in that it can put pressure on you that you don't necessarily need. It can make you dance to somebody else's tune because you have to kind of always hold the investors as, you know, you're trying to fulfill what they want, not what the business necessarily needs. And I also witnessed a lot of businesses struggling from the kind of quote unquote hustle culture, which was all tied up with investment of like, start a brand, get investment, hustle, don't burn out, grow quick, get a massive team, buy a Tesla. But it was all like that thing, right? And it's like, actually, that's not realistic.
Welcome to another episode of Right Success, the podcast that takes you on a learning journey to a more productive, creative, and active life through the power of the bike. I'm your host, Pedro Couto Lopez. You can find me on LinkedIn under my own name. And in the podcast, I explore cycling's global trends, community needs, innovative business strategies, and the journeys of remarkable individuals in the world of cycling. Today's guest is Lily Rice. She's a sportswear designer, a passionate runner, a mom, and the unapologetically bold founder of the Long Run Club, an ethical teamwear brand that is flipping the script on sustainability in the cycling world. From ditching the hustle culture to facing failure head-on, Lily's story is honest, inspiring, and wildly refreshing. In this episode, we dig into the lessons from resilience, on why growth is a power move, and why and how strength can look like standing up, literally and metaphorically, for what matters. Before we get into the podcast, I have a huge request. If you like what you listen, please consider giving us a follow. It helps me to continue bringing you amazing people with inspiring stories and bring us on a learning journey together. Now, let's get into the episode. Welcome, Lily, to Right to Success. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, if a little bit nervous.
Well, I'll try to do my best to make you as comfortable as possible. And thanks for coming on the podcast again. I wanted to have this conversation with you because what strikes me about you from my research, being connected with you on LinkedIn, is your approach to failure, which is very much transparent and unapologetic. And you openly share your setbacks, whether it's in business, sports, which helps to destigmatize the idea of failure. And I think from a person like me, I think many other people that are listening, I think failure is an opportunity for growth, and is a way to build true strength. And this is something that you learn over the years. It's not something that isn't, you are born with it. So I kind of wanted to understand from your perspective, where this mindset that you have, this resilience that you have built over the years, have come from. Is it from your background as a designer? Is it as a background as a sports enthusiast? How did you nurture it? How did you develop it?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. I think people's approach to failure is actually really interesting. And kind of, imposter syndrome and all that kind of stuff that's tied up together. I don't know if I could definitively say where my attitude comes from, but I think there are certain elements of my life that definitely have a role to play. So I've always done sport from a really young age, and my dad has a very level attitude about youth sport and kind of participation being far more important than winning. I actually played women's or girls football, and so the opportunities for girls and women when I was playing as a youngster weren't the same. So therefore, I don't think my dad felt a need to put a pressure on me that he might have done had I been a boy. And so you build up a level of resilience through sport, which is probably really familiar to you and so much of your community. what's interesting to me is then that some people can take that lesson they've learned in sport of not coming where you want in a cycle race, not, being even able to attend a race or event that you've trained for because you got an injury, right? All of these things.
Yeah.
Some people then apply that to the rest of their life and kind of follow that through. Other people don't seem to, and where they can deal with that in one segment of life, they can't in another. As you say, my profession's design, and I worked for a long time in-house, but also as a freelancer. And so you're very used to rejection as a designer. You're very used. It's just part of the process. It's not even, I guess, rejection's a strong label, but I send you a design and you say, oh, I like it, but can we change this? And I change it. Then I send it back. Oh, I like it, but can you do this? So it just becomes part of who I am. So I guess I just don't see failure as a bad thing. It's just part of a process.
Yeah, I think I'm totally with you in that. Is that, yes, I mean, your experience as a designer, as a freelancer, rejection is day to day, is happens every time you have to submit a project for approval. So it's, that kind of that over time builds that level of kind of resilience and perhaps even attitude of where it's attitude of, it's not about me, it's about them. I'm doing the best I can, but they have other expectations that may not have been communicated in advance. So it's a process of reframing the failure as well, or reframing rejection. But I think that's my take on it.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. And I think it becomes even more. Sometimes we'll get, so with the Long Run Club, we create custom sportswear. And so we'll have a client come and say, can you create a custom cycle jersey? This is the design we want. And then sometimes they'll bring in a third party later on in the journey. Maybe it's a sponsor, maybe it's an event organizer or an athlete. And there's also an element sometimes of, you'll get someone give you an opinion. And for me, it's on this, but it could be on anything in your life. You'll get someone give you an opinion because they feel they should contribute something. And actually, for me, I'm kind of detached from that. And sometimes I let people, give me that input and then I go, okay. And then I go away and kind of just do what we were doing anyway. But they need to feel that. And I think that happens to a lot of people in a lot of areas of lives, whether it's kind of your boss or your coach or a family member. Maybe you're starting a business and a family member's like, oh, well, you should do the business like this. And you're like, thanks for that, Auntie Ethel. But I think it's learning to work out who you want to take feedback from as well, and then who you just need to let the feedback kind of glide over you.
Very good. So you mentioned the Long Run Club, and I wanted to touch on this, obviously, because now is your business. Can you share the journey, from that you mentioned you started as a designer, as a freelancer, you are still that at heart, but you founded the Long Run Club, and I'm interested to find out what inspired you to take that leap. And really, I think as a two-part question is, what do you think was missing in the industry that you wanted to change through creating the Long Run Club?
Yeah, sure. So my background is that I did a degree in performance sportswear design. I then went on to work for Umbro, who were owned by Nike at the time, as a designer on football kits. Wow. And I really enjoyed it. It's an amazing team, an amazing company, but they really weren't doing anything in the female space. And I felt quite passionately about that. So I then launched my own business, which was a women's sportswear brand. And I received investment for that, ran that for a few years, and then came to a kind of crossroads and decided to move into freelance. I worked in freelance for about 9 years, and someone that came to me as a client was Preska. Now, Preska was the world's first climate positive sportswear brand. That is a tag that will go with me to my grave because I've said it so many times. But Preska was an amazing brand that many cyclists are kind of familiar with, because they were really creating something different in the cycling space. It was founded by Rob and Guy. Rob came to it from a long distance running, and Guy came from triathlon, and both are passionate cyclists. And they really felt that something was missing in the sportswear space in terms of creating garments that were better for the planet. So the boys set up originally as teamwear and then moved into retail. They brought me on to work on the retail in the design space. And then I joined them kind of within the company. Unfortunately, Prescott ended. But when it did, and when it was ending, Guy and I realised that, you know, there was a demand for custom teamwear within cycling that was still better, that was using better fabrics for the planet, was using a more sustainable and ethical manufacturing process. And so we kind of had blessings from the investors and the old team, and we decided to set up the Long Run Club to cater for this. And we just feel really passionately that when you benefit from the outdoors, as we all do, so specifically as kind of cyclists, runners and athletes, that to then create garments or products that damage the playground that you're essentially using is such an oxymoron, right? So it seems completely logical, and yet there's so many brands not kind of being active in that space authentically. That was really the kind of genesis for setting up the brand and kind of the real ethos that runs through the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I think nowadays especially, it's like you look at brands and you do want to know kind of what value they are bringing to you, you know, that story. And I think what you're doing is just focusing on the ethical and sustainability of producing custom kit for different verticals in the sports world. It's kind of, it resonates because it allows people to, as you mentioned, you know, not destroy the playground that we very much enjoy using, whether it's cycling, running, triathlon. And I think it's a critical part of nowadays where so much of is discussed about the consequences that the fashion industry has on our environment and our biosphere. I mean, you know, you mentioned, or I mentioned ethical teamwear as kind of one of your taglines, if you will. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I wanted just kind of to break down what does this actually mean? Because you can, you know, the thing with a lot of clothing brands, a lot of fashion is that they can say a lot of things on their websites, in their communications on social media, and that can really kind of put smoke and mirrors into people's perspectives of what actually an ethical product looks like. So, from your perspective, from your, you know, if you're pulling the curtain for us to look into, what does it actually look like?
Sure. So I do a specifically bad job at explaining this, only because we do so much, I tend to forget a lot of it. But I've made it a little bit easier for myself recently because we became B Corp certified. So this is something that's really interesting and really important as a consumer to kind of look for, is recognized certificates that are independently verified. So they're not something you can just buy. They're not kind of a club you can pay into, although for full transparency with B Corp, we do pay membership fees. But what B Corp means is that we were independently assessed, and it's a very arduous process for our ethics and sustainability, and that we've met a certain criteria. And not only that, but we can only be certified for a set number of years, and then you reapply to ensure that you're always improving and always following what you've said you've done. And firstly, we are B Corp, so that kind of just gives people the confidence that they can trust what we say. I think, as you mentioned, it's very easy to kind of say, oh, we do this, but do you really? So we're B Corp. Following that, we are also a member of 1% for the Planet. So that means that we pledge to give 1% of our profits to causes that benefit the planet. We're also members of the Better Business Network, which means that we openly share and contribute to a network that wants to put people and planet before profit. So those are the kind of like overarching things. But getting down to the nitty gritty, on a basic level, all our garments are made to order, so there's never any waste. We don't hold any stock. We don't make anything surplus. We only make what's ordered. All of our garments are made from post-consumer recycled plastic. Now, the kind of prefix of post-consumer is quite important because there's been a lot of investigation around recycled plastic fabrics. Where is this plastic coming from? So ours is from discarded fishing nets and used plastic bottles. That is made in Europe. We then manufacture our garments in Europe, and our factory is sustainably powered. So they use wind and solar to power the factory. We removed as many trims as possible from our garments. So that firstly meant that there weren't the front end of the excess of those trims being made and manufactured, but it also means that the product's end of life, it's easier to recycle because you don't have to take so many things off. A kind of a real misconception around garments is like, oh, it's cool because it can be recycled. Well, actually, some things mean it's more difficult. It's a bit like biodegradable, which is another kind of subject to get onto, but it's like technically everything would be biodegradable, just depends how long, which then leads me on to packaging. So all our packaging has been specially chosen for its sustainability. We kind of keep to a real minimal, like anything like a swing tag or anything kind of on that end as well. That's kind of on the physicality of the product, which I think, okay, yeah, it's brilliant. We love it. That's great. A lot of brands do this. So beyond that, the things that we also do is we carbon offset all of our orders. So when you make an order with us, we try and minimize the carbon impact, but then we also offset the carbon impact. So we do that through gold standard credits, which puts finances into tree planting and kind of projects that better the planet. We have terms with our factories that they've signed, and we visit our factories to ensure ethical manufacturing in terms of our workers' rights. So this is something that's quite often missed by the big brands. They'll use a recycled fabric, they'll use their own dead stock, which is another discussion. But then it's like, okay, but how are you treating your workers? Are they being paid fairly? Are they being treated fairly? How long are they working? It's why we produce only in Europe, because the laws and regulations are tighter. So we know that the factories are bound by law, but we also visit them. So we try to look at everything from designing it for a circular economy, to the manufacturing process, to the delivery. We send everything by kind of sea and land where possible. We try very hard not to use air where possible, to offering to take back garments. So if your club or corporate are finished with the garments and you want to send them back to us, we'll take responsibility. We will try to rehome them or hold on to them till recycling is possible. And we've even done things like recycling trials. So really groundbreakingly, we managed to get one of our products recycled back into a plastic bottle through a trial.
Wow.
It was pink, but as long as pink's your vibe, we can do it. So yeah, it's a really long answer, and I'm sure I've missed loads of things, but that's a lot of what we do.
Yeah, I mean, no, thanks for sharing, because what that just shows is that the amount of complexity, the amount of thought that goes into the process of from design to sourcing to producing to recycling. And as a consumer looking at different options, I think it's hard to communicate all of these processes, all of these value that you're getting. And I think it's essential to share this, because it's, people buy into values and buy into the story of a brand. Also price comes into it, obviously, but there's an emotional commitment that people have towards a brand, whether because they like the designs, whether because they like what it stands for, or just simply because they like the price. But there is an element of that emotional commitment that is about what the brand stands for. And you see that with many global brands, that people buy into them because they know what they stand for, they know what it means. Obviously, there is elements as well to the pricing of it, though, the kudos that you get socially from wearing them. But that's kind of that's a whole discussion about kind of sustainability, about credibility in the world of in the fashion to kind of to create that what you mentioned, contribute to the circular economy. And I want to come back to this, but I want to come back to this point because it's something that is kind of is within your DNA. But I can't help myself notice, the vast array of medals behind you. And I wanted to like, because obviously you have an interest in sports, in design for cyclists, for runners. So how does cycling or endurance sports, running, play a part in your life?
So as I talked about before, I started kind of into sports in football, and I played football quite competitively up until university. And then I found it quite difficult to commit to a team sport. I didn't drive at the time. And obviously you have different responsibilities at uni, although now I look back and think, oh my gosh, you had so much free time. But at the time it was new for me, right? So it was like juggling studies, a job, and then a team sport, and it didn't really work for me. So I looked around at kind of like what are the options, and I genuinely really remember I used to have a pair of Nike shoes. I don't know if anyone else remembers this. You used to have a pair of Nike shoes and you had a little chip thing that went in your shoe, and then it would talk to your phone. So you would record how far you ran, and then like Williams would be like, you just ran your first mile, good job, or whatever. This was like a really early, before we all had watches and stuff. And I had that, and I really remember doing my first 3 miles and being like, oh my gosh, I've done 3 miles. And so I just kind of fell in love with running. And it stayed in my life in and out for a long time. And then I had my daughter, and I was thinking about races. I think I was probably doing park runs, and my cousin was signed up to a marathon, and I was like, I always wanted a marathon. So I signed up to Brighton Marathon, and committed to do it fundraising for charity, because I knew that if I committed to do it for a charity, I would actually do it. And so trained really hard, did my first marathon. It was absolutely horrific. It was the year they ran out of water and there was a heat wave. Oh, and I was really slow. So obviously, like, there was no water when I got to places. I got more sunburn and sunstroke than anything else. And obviously then I was hooked on endurance sports, because that's how we all get hooked, right? You have the most horrific, you're never going to do it again, and then you book something else. So
type 2 enjoyment,
Exactly. So, and then what I didn't realize when I ran was I was very, very early pregnant with my son. So I then had my second child, but the way it worked out was I'd ran like the Brighton, I don't know, early 1 year or whatever, had my son, and then had enough time to recover and get a marathon in the next year. So then I'd done 2 consecutive marathons. Well, it's not really, but for normal people, it's impressive. So I'd done 2 consecutive marathons, like one each year. So then I was like, well, now I have to do this every year. This is a thing now. So I did that consistently for, I don't know how many years, a few. And then like a lot of these are kind of training races in between, because if you're going to give me a medal, I'm going to display it. And then I set my sights on like longer. So I did an ultra, and then I became obsessed with the spine race, because that is just completely gnarly. So
can you please elaborate what it is? I don't know what it is. Spine race.
Everyone's kind of probably more cycling. So the spine race is this ridiculous race that happens every year for ultra runners. You can't even just enter. You have to be able to say that you've done certain distances and things before you enter. It goes across the Pennine Way. It's in January. The conditions are horrible. You're self-sufficient, so you have to carry everything on your back. There are kind of little stop-offs, but you have to get to certain checkpoints with certain times. Anyway, it's ridiculous. It's really hard.
How long is this race?
I don't even know how long the full one is. but it's far, really far. And it's really addictive to watch because you can kind of dot watch them and like
Right.
safety
Okay.
of your warm home post Christmas and like cheer them on. But they do a baby version called the Spine Race Sprint, which is kind of the entry level one. So I just thought, yeah, I'll sign up to it. Long story short, signed up to it. Training wasn't ideal because it never is, but you know, committed to it. Getting the kit in itself is a process. Rocked up, started, was doing fine, and then 11 o'clock at night in the absolute pitch black on the Pennine Way, I found myself alone in bogs, and it was a bit like Mordor. I felt like Frodo. I was lost, man. And eventually had to pull out, so I didn't complete it. And then I have since, yeah, so that was a failure, but it's fine. It's like cool. It's I tried it. And then I tried to re-enter the following year, but now realised that it's so far clashed with my son's birthday every year, and I've been told I'm not allowed to go get lost because my husband was having heart palpitations, that I had no phone signal. So you have a tracker on, but I had no phone signals. He's literally at home watching this dot go round in circles at 11 o'clock at night, going like she's an idiot.
That would be very panicking. I would be like, what is going on?
So yeah, exactly. So that's kind of my side of endurance sports. And then in terms of cycling, it's quite funny because I obviously run a very cycling based brand. But I'm right. Okay. So I was going to say I'm a really bad cyclist, but that's not true. I'm not a competitive cyclist. And at Prescott, everyone used to laugh at me because I ride like a shopping style bike with a basket on the front. It's very vintage. Mm-hmm. There is no aero involved in anything I do on a bike. Never will be.
It's just a bike. That's what it matters.
But exactly. So I'm not a bad cyclist. I'm a leisure cyclist. I'm very happy. And actually, we spent last week in the 7th circle of hell, which is teaching your small children to ride their bikes. That was like 3 hours of my life I'm not getting back because my kids absolutely love cycling.
Did you succeed in that task?
So my daughter can ride. So way back when we used to live on a housing estate that had a cul-de-sac, and my husband threw in the towel and was like, I can't teach her to ride a bike. And I was like, it's okay, I'll do it. And so I took her out every single day for 2 weeks to do loops of the cul-de-sac. And sometimes it was like 1 loop, sometimes it was like 3 loops. By the end of the 2 weeks, she was fully riding, like no stabilizers, nothing, fully on it. So then my son, we signed up to some kind of like bike ability, learn to bike on what's the thing? The balance bike, right? And then he rocked up and the teacher's like, he can ride a bike. He doesn't need a balance bike. Just give him a bike. And then he basically could just ride. I don't know how, not my genetics. But it's like, obviously, as soon as you go outside, it's like, oh, there's a pedal. Oh, there's a branch. Oh, there's a squirrel. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's not enough coffee. So it's a very mixed relationship with bikes in my house. But of course, I love cyclists. So I love cyclists. I just don't love tiny cyclists that hate branches, squirrels, and pedals.
Well, it's part of the journey. It's part of the process. This is brilliant story. I think I've just recently became a father, so I've yet that to look forward to.
I mean, it's wonderful. Like, the really good thing is, so going back to like when I was running and stuff, like bikes were very involved then because my husband would cycle alongside me and we'd put the kids in the trailer and they'd come. And that was really fun because it's, I guess, the first introduction of your children being part of your enjoyment of the outdoors. I also I don't know how familiar your community are with Jasmine Paris, but she's a very amazing ultra runner. So she completed the Barkley Marathon. She was the first woman to complete it in eons, blah, blah, blah. So I took part in the COP24 run. So they run the baton the same distance for the COP. Anyway, I quickly realised no one had signed up to the relay part before Jasmine Paris, so to hand the baton to Jasmine Paris. So I signed up for this and made my husband come with me. So he rode the bike and I did the run because it was at like 3 a.m. in the pitch black, just so I could hand her the baton and say I'd handed a baton to Jasmine Paris. Although I would say I am more a runner than a cyclist, weirdly bikes are very involved in a lot of my running stories.
Brilliant. Oh, brilliant. That's great to hear. That. Well, I mean, whether it is a runner, whether it is a cyclist, people that enjoy riding bikes, it's all physical activity is all good for you. So that's all it matters, really.
Yeah, and I think the mindset is really similar. Like that's the thing I've really found being exposed through Presco and now the Long Run Club to runners, cyclists, and triathletes is the mindset is very similar. Although there's obviously kind of niches and specific things that are certain to your sport in terms of going back again to things like approaching failure, making yourself train, taking on new adventures and new challenges. The mindset is all the same within those communities. So you can sit down with a cyclist, a runner, or a triathlete from any country, anywhere, and find common ground to talk to them about. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, very true. Very true. I wanted to touch on I think one aspect about your business and returning slightly to your business. I think this conversation is going to be like a ping pong kind of thing, but that's okay. That's how it flows. I'm interested in finding out because from my research, the Long Run Club, your kind of one of your mottos is we are here for the long term, and with that, comes certain choices that you have to make, whether some perhaps is not taking private equity into the business. And you have decided to kind of focus on growing the business, the Long Run Club, organically. And I think that there is an interesting parallel between kind of your competitive nature through revealing these stories that you've just shared with us, and the kind of wanting to grow the business without having to rely on like having money being poured into the business from like private investors or angel investors. And I'm interested to find out, because this is definitely kind of one way of doing it amongst many others. And there are some battles that you have to go over, having to do everything by yourself without having to rely on other people's help. And I'm interested from an entrepreneur kind of perspective, what is the strength that you need to have and to do things on your own way, on your own terms, and kind of grow a business that is going to be here for your children?
So I've had experience with investment, as I touched on my first business. I had early investment with that. So I was actually part of a TV show and one investment, so say. So I had investment from the founders of Innocent Smoothies. I think investment can be a poison chalice in that it can put pressure on you that you don't necessarily need. It can make you dance to somebody else's tune because you have to kind of always hold the investors as, you're trying to fulfill what they want, not what the business necessarily needs. And I also witnessed a lot of businesses struggling from the kind of quote unquote hustle culture, which was all tied up with investment of like start a brand, get investment, hustle, don't burn out, grow quick, get a massive team, buy a Tesla. But it was all like that thing, right? Of like, do that, drink Huel and show that you don't have time for a meal because we're all doing this thing for our investors and blah, blah, blah. We're all ballers. And it's like, actually, that's not realistic. Like, reason that certain people that are kind of iconic within that culture, obviously you've got like your Stephen Bartlett's and then I forget his name, but the guy from Gymshark and stuff like that, like they're held up as the poster boys of this culture, right? Rightly or wrongly what they did. But the reason that they're poster boys is because they were unique. They were the few that achieved it. Not everyone achieved it. For every single one of them, there's 1,000 people that tried and failed because it's not a sustainable thing to do in terms of person, not planet. I mean, it's not sustainable for the planet either, but you can't work like that, or very few people can work like that, survive and come out the other side. It's not healthy for you, but that's not healthy for the business either. And so when Presca was closing and we were kind of like going, there's still this, real opportunity that we think we could fulfill. Guy and myself, Guy's the other co-founder, we made the decision pretty early on that we wanted to approach this much more organically. For us, part of the USP of the Long Run Club is that you're going to speak to a person. So we didn't want to automate everything. We didn't want to grow to a point where we're using AI for every single thing to get more customers in so that we don't have to deal with people, because that's not what we're about, right? We're runners, cyclists, triathletes, and we want to talk to runners, cyclists, and triathletes. Like, that's why you come to us. So we then didn't want to get investors in, because with the money comes the power for them to dictate how you do stuff, right? And so then they can say, well, no, you have to grow because you told me I was going to get a return on my investment in 3 years. So you have to grow. And we're like, we don't necessarily want to do that at the expense of the planet. And both of us have experienced, very supportive investors, but we've also experienced investors who are very much in it for the financials, which is fine. That's their thing, which means they don't necessarily, in their words, get sustainability. I don't even know that it was a choice for us. I think it was something we had to do, but I do think it's good to lift the lid for people starting businesses or early on in their business, and showing that there is a different way to do business. You don't need to necessarily get an investment. One thing I've learned that I think is valuable to share is, if you are going out for investment and you think that's the right path, then sure as hell know what you're spending that investment on. Don't go out to get investment to be able to go, oh yeah, I got like X amount of investment, because what are you going to do with it? You're just going to squander it. What you want to be doing is getting your business into a place where you can no longer fulfill demand because it's so huge, and then you're getting investment to allow you to do that. Otherwise, getting this investment on the idea that you're going to grow into it is dangerous, because that's when you're putting that pressure on. And that's what I've seen a lot of is kind of younger brands going, oh yeah, we're going to take on this money, we're going to get loads more staff members, we're going to do all this marketing. And you're like, okay, but how are your sales? Because
that's the bottom line. I mean, and I think that that reveals like your intrinsic values of what your core beliefs is about making the business as ethical and sustainable as possible, and that requires, if you will, requires time. And through this journey of growing and running Long Run Club, and as someone that openly shares failures and it's the lessons that you have learned through it, what is a failure that, well, it was a failure at that time, but let's just frame it as a failure for the sake of the question, but that you are now grateful for?
God, all of them, everything. Yeah, everything. So
one that stands out?
I think closing Lexi was really painful. Lexi was my first business. It was really painful. I was quite young, so I think I would have been early or mid-20s. And that felt like a failure because it felt public, right? So I think that's the other thing that's tied up with failure. If you're failing and you haven't told anyone you were going to do the thing anyway, are you really failing? But when you own a brand and everybody knows about it and you were on TV with it, then it feels quite big. But then I had a very successful freelance career off the back of that. Now, I would not have got the clients that I was lucky enough to work with if I hadn't have had the kind of CV that Lexi gave me. It also gave me the ability to see product creation from the very initial stages all the way to the end because I was a one-man band doing everything. So then when I stepped into work for clients, I was bringing with me this wealth of knowledge that a normal designer wouldn't have because they've only worked in the design office. So
yeah,
it felt like a failure when I closed it. But weirdly, I have very few things that I'm not at peace with when I fail. So when I make that decision to close a business, walk away, DNF a race, I'm quite quick to have assessed, like, okay, why are we failing at this? Like, why are we making this decision? And then I'm okay with it. I let stuff go quite easily. And I think that's important as well. Like, there's no point beating yourself up about something that you feel you failed. Like, learn the lessons, but don't take it into the next day, week, year of, oh, I'm shit at this. Because you're not. Like, there'll be reasons why something didn't work out. Or just have kids and then like you just fail every day at everything because you're like can't be in 63 places at once, doing all the things. You cook them the wrong thing, they don't want to go to bed. So yeah, just that every day is a failure when you're a parent. It's totally fine. You just kind of like, oh well, it's just fine.
Well, I think yes.
You're like,
I think it's so. I know. I wanted to say that I'm completely there. I'm completely there, going through that at the moment. But I would just wanted to like acknowledge that part of that is. It's so important to kind of feel the pain, feel the frustration, feel the kind of the annoyance of what that the happening of failing something, and acknowledge that, and then try to assess, like you've said, and try to kind of gain some perspective and understand that maybe some things were out of your control, others were, and just try to do better next time. And I think it's obviously is easier said than done, because as most things are, but it takes practice. There is just a kind of I'm going to butcher this, but there is something that I've heard that deeply resonated with me, which is there are some investors that look at businesses or look at entrepreneurs and ask them, how, have you had any bankruptcies? Have you had any failed businesses? And if you didn't have, I don't think that we are going to invest in you, because that part of that process comes with learnings. You become stronger. You understand what to do, what not to do, where to put your money. And so it goes to show that sometimes failure is essential for your journey. And as you said, all failures for you are important, because it's where it made you what you are now. It kind of allowed you to kind of come through a journey, through many, from founding Long Run Club, and just being now talking to me here now. Not that I'm the pinnacle of podcasts. I'm not trying to say that.
Yeah, yes.
Sorry.
I told you. So before we started recording, I told Pedro I was really nervous because I listened to this podcast. And so although I've done a few other recordings for various things, this was the one that made me really nervous because it is the pinnacle. But yeah, no, I think that's is really interesting. I've heard that too about investors. And when you're a young person, I think that's really frustrating, because it's kind of almost like that thing of a job application, right? Where they say you have to have X experience. And you're like, I can't get experience if you don't give me the job. But now, being on the other side of it, I can completely see why some investors say that. I think one of the biggest lessons I learned was when I was on my own, people were pushing me to have a co-founder, and I didn't know how to do that because the business was already set up and was already running. I'd already taken investment. It was my idea. It was my baby. Yeah. And I just couldn't understand how I could bring in a co-founder. And then actually, when we go back and look at some of the people I referenced earlier with like the hustle culture and stuff, like with Gymshark and stuff, he quite quickly brought in people on the management team, directors team. And I think you see that in very successful brands. If they don't have a co-founder, very quickly find a team that can advise them. And I didn't do that with Lexi. And I think that's why it failed. Whereas with the Long Run Club, we started it together. and we complement each other very well. And I think as well, with failure and age comes the wisdom to know what you're not good at. Excel and I do not have a great friendship. Like, I will visit Excel land and I know what to do with the squares, but let me play with the live sheets. Whereas like my co-founder is all over that side. So if you come to us and you ask for a quote, it's like Guy's switched on and has all that stuff ready at hand, whereas I'm visuals, marketing, and community. So I think, yeah, it's frustrating when you're young, whether it's young in business or age, in terms of how do you gain that experience? How do you gain those failures without going through it? But yeah, it's like listening to resources like this, taking stuff on board, doing your research. But yeah, that's the benefit of failure. That's the benefit of going wrong, is you kind of get to a better place.
Exactly. And I think it's very importantly what you said, because it helps people reframe that. And I think I wanted to kind of build on that, what you just said. And like for people listening, I think one critical thing is that people sometimes, and I sometimes put myself in that box, is like I find difficult to start things because I say, well, I don't think I'm ready for this. And many people find themselves in that position, whether they want to start people whether they want to sign up for a 5K run, a park run, or want to sign up to a big challenge, or want to start a business. And I want to ask you, like, from your position, what advice would you give someone that thinks that they're not ready to start something? And I think I want you to especially frame this to women that are listening to the podcast, because I think, well, that's based on my opinions, based on statistics, that women sometimes do not apply for a job or not start something because they don't feel 100% ready or do not 100% meet the criteria. I'm not trying to mansplain here. This is just data that out there. So what advice would you give to them?
So I get to pull out my favorite statistic of ever. So my favorite bit of research ever in the world is around Americans got asked in an emergency, with no prior training, did they think they could land a jumbo jet? And like over half of men thought that, yeah, they could do it. They could land the plane, which I just think goes to show a lot about the male approach to challenges. And like some of that's positive, right? Like, I'm glad that if a plane's going down, some guy thinks that he can potentially land it. Good for you. But I think it also reflects like women. So there's another statistic that's like something like if a man meets like one criteria on a job application, he will apply, whereas women want to fulfill all the criteria on the application. I think a lot of this goes back to childhood and the way that children are raised in our society around being a good girl, the attributes that come with being a girl versus being a boy, what's boisterous, all this stuff. So this kind of then drips down into becoming a woman and how you approach things. I think there's a very big difference between wanting to sign up to an event, as in a physical event, be it cycling, running, whatever, and starting a business, in terms of if you're going to sign up for a marathon, you can't sign up and do one next week, man, woman, or child. Let's be realistic, unless you've done some kind of level of training and you have, some. So I think, okay, on that side, it's like, if you want to do a marathon, crack on. You can definitely do it. I don't care who you are, you can do it. It's proven every day. There are these amazing people with challenges that they overcome, and they do the long distance endurance events. But you need to be realistic about the time of like, okay, when am I going to do this? When I need to put the training in, and then you do the damn training, you will get there, you will achieve. In terms of starting a business today, start your business today. Screw it. Nothing bad will happen from starting a business. The worst thing that will happen from starting a business is that you will not succeed in that business, close it, and start a new one later down the line. I think, you don't need all the skills now. There's YouTube, there's podcasts, there's courses, there's so much free kind of access that you can get onto and learn things. I am dyslexic, dyspraxic, and I have dyscalculia, which in a nutshell means I'm bad at spelling, bad at maths, and you can't take me to a gig because I can't clap in time to music. But I just use resources to overcome these things. I found a co-founder, like I said, that matches my skill set. And I started a business that I know a lot about, and I bring something to the table. If it goes back to the plane analogy, I think for women, there's a lot of men that will go, oh, I know loads about this. And it's like, actually, I know loads about this. There's also some other thing that goes around social media the other day about some guy mansplained. And he was like, and if you reference this paper by such and such, and she's like, I am such and such. That's my paper. I wrote it. So, you know, there'll always be someone that tells you, as we said, like at the very beginning as well, there's always someone wanting to give you advice of like, this is how you should run your business, or have you thought about specializing in pug jackets when you're like, actually, I was going to do jackets for cycling, but thanks. You've just got to start the damn thing. That's it. And that can look however you want it to look, whether you want to register the company, whether you want to reserve the social handles and the website, or whether you just want to tell your family, this is what I'm going to do. But do something solid. That's that first step. And then you will find those steps snowball. And people will want to help you too, and you'll get further along.
Yeah, I think it's I guess that's a kind of an attitude is of just start the first step. Don't be afraid. I mean, fear is inevitable, but don't let that hold you back. Just try. And I think that's kind of taking kind of what you just said. I think that's key. And you know, you have shared many powerful perspectives on what it means to be strong, to take action. And I'm interested because I think this, as we touched upon several times already, is something that is you grow, like resilience builds as kind of how has your definition of strength evolved? And you mentioned motherhood, you mentioned being an entrepreneur, founder, designer. You know, when I look at people and I feel inspired by them, there's always an element, a combination of the purpose that they have in their lives, the strength that they kind of communicate towards others, and an aspect of as well of resilience. And I'm interested from your perspective, and I think you're quite in a good position to maybe share with us what does strength mean to you?
I think we are living through very interesting times politically, and in business and society. And I think that it's become very easy to look at what's going on in the world and see what strength is. Strength is kind of lifting up those around you and protecting the most vulnerable members of our society. And I think it doesn't matter what your position is, whether that's President of America or a billionaire, or maybe you're not, maybe you're just quote unquote normal. You need to use your voice and your power, your influence to help others, to help the planet, to create a fairer playing field for everyone. And that's what I feel really passionate about. I think there's so much going on at the moment where people in power are using bullying tactics or abusing their positions, but that's not strength. That's benefiting themselves. And I don't think that's admirable. And I don't think that's the society we want to push forward. And I think being strong is about, doing better for others. And And when you kind of look at the people you admire, the podcasts you listen to people to be inspired, often that's the thread for me. Is it's like, oh yeah, she started a business and she sold it for billions, but that's really cool because actually that business did X, Y, and Z, which has had really good impact on the world, whether that's creating jobs for people, putting funding back into this. And now she's sold that business and she's using that money to do X, Y, and Z for her communities where she started. Those are the people I'm interested in, not the people that are like, oh, I'm worth £1 billion, so now I'm gonna go and, I don't know, buy a social media platform. Like, cool, well done, great. So yeah, I think strength is just about using your assets. The interesting thing about that too, right, is so you use your voice to help those that need it, but it comes back to you. So the more you're using your talents and your abilities, the more you grow and learn and get more opportunities. So it's never selfless as much as it might come from that place. So you benefit from it too, right? So it's always worthwhile doing.
Yeah, exactly. I think there is an element of, if you prop up the people around you, you yourself also grow with them. I think so. And when you said ordinary people being ordinary, I think that's in itself, it's I think is enough. You are making a change to yourself first of all, and then people around you. If you are kind of touching the communities, local communities, that is already a huge benefit to yourself, but also especially to the people around you. And I think looking when in a global world, when you touch and are able to help the people around you, especially, that's when you start elevating yourself and the people around you. It's especially with kind of everyone trying to have a voice, everyone trying to shout what they believe in and what they think. It's very easy to get lost if you kind of in the whirlwind of social media. And I think having beliefs that you have are grounded, and so what you have been sharing with us helps you to then be purposeful and really take action to what matters the most. And when people share that and kind of that resonates, not with everyone, but will resonate with the people that matter the most. And I think that's key. I think that's very important. There is also, with there's also an aspect with the Long Run Club, which I wanted to touch, which is with the creating like a safe space for women, for gender diverse people in the running community, in the cycling community, in the triathlon community. And I think perhaps it's a difficult question to ask you, but I wanted to ask you nonetheless, just to see what's your take. How does this Long Run Club, caters and kind of addresses that's kind of these less represented and elevates them so that there is gender equality, there is communications that speak equally to both sexes, both everyone.
So I think it's really topical at the moment to discuss this. I mean, on a very basic level, we have a 0% pay gap within our company. Mm-hmm. I am very passionate about women's rights, and I'm passionate about equality for less represented groups. We took away quite early the language of a women's cut and a men's cut within the garments, which sounds really basic, but is actually slightly complex given that we create performance kit for cycling because anatomies are different. So we have to recognize that. But we now refer with our jerseys and our t-shirts to the cuts as shaped and straight. I personally prefer to wear the straight cut, which historically would have been labeled a men's cut. But I don't think that the cut of t-shirt or jersey you wear should necessarily dictate your gender. So it seemed like a very easy change for us. But I think it's an important change because I think it says a lot about who we are as a company, that we've considered that and we want everyone to feel comfortable. I mean, I have my own personal opinions on the gender arguments, which is that I have never been sexually harassed or assaulted by anyone who identifies as trans or non-binary, but I have experienced harassment from cis men all my life. So to me, who is the bigger concern and where should our focus be? And I don't think it's on preventing trans people from competing in races and sport. I understand that that's a really important argument for some people. On the reverse, they feel very strongly around and the reason I'm talking the way that I'm talking at this point during the podcast is because I think as well it's really important to respect pronouns and respect language to get things right. Everyone should feel comfortable within sport, and I find it so upsetting that there are so many people that don't take the time to try and learn more. We're not all going to get it right 100% of the time, and I think people accept that you're sometimes going to misgender someone accidentally or use the wrong language accidentally, but make the effort and try. But yeah, and quite frankly, the Long Run Club is my company alongside Guy, and that is my personal feeling, and therefore that is going to be the feeling of the company, is that sport is a welcoming place for everyone and a safe space for everyone. And we will continue to do what we can as a company as things come up to support people from marginalized groups and make, what has traditionally been a kind of elite and and white and male space in cycling for others more open and more accessible.
Yeah, I think it's an important standpoint to make because that's the value of the brand. That's what you, and a personal one from what you said, and I think is, from my perspective, is not up for discussion. Respect of everyone is key. If there is no respect for different members of the community, then what else there is. So I think is a critical It's critical because we are all humans. We are trying to all make the best of what we can with what the resources we're given. Obviously, let me just caveat that by saying there are certain privileges that come with being a white male. So there is much more privileges, I have to say. So I need to caveat that by saying that. But we all trying to make the best of with what we have. So it's important to kind of be respectful and try to understand different perspectives, because that's how we gain a better understanding of the world we live in.
I think as well, on a really basic level, like the joy and the pleasure that we all get from cycling and running and triathlons and sport in general, like if you just take a second to like picture like your very favorite cycling memory, like that, either that adventure you went on when you were on those hills, or that gravel ride, or achieving that ride, why would that feeling not be available for everyone? Like, why would you not want to gift that to everyone in your community? Why would you not want to say to someone, especially someone who maybe feels ostracized or is having a hard time in other parts of their lives, like, come here, come into this community, come and see how amazing we can give you these 2 wheels and a bit of metal, and look what you can do. Like, that's the bit I don't get, and the thing that I think we stand for And that's part of the, like, one of our biggest customers is corporate. So it will be brands that are maybe putting on a charity ride or a ride for their employees. And so a lot of people that come and touch our brand are people that wouldn't regard themselves as cyclists. Maybe, the bike's been in the shed for 10 years and they've not got on it since. But because the boss has said, no, you got to turn up to this thing, they've said, oh, okay. Or they're a cyclist, but they've never done a challenge like this. And it's like, actually, we can open the doors to expand in this community and expand in that feeling to many more people. And that's only better for us because, then there's more funding for everything. People who maybe those people would not necessarily have cared about a cycle lane being put in now care because they went on that ride. Or that event, they would have normally complained about that event being held there, but now they see the value. So, again, I'm being selfish, but let's bring more people into the community. It's positive.
Yeah, it's about breaking down those barriers. It's about opening up doors, like you said, and because there's studies coming out weekly, monthly about showing us that, in regards to cycling infrastructure, is the representation is not there yet. The equality is not there between men and women, and there's been many improvements, but there is still women still. Well, okay, let me rephrase this. So, according to the studies, women still have less trust in riding bikes on cities, or feel that there is less trust. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not trying to put words into anyone's mouth here, but so there is with this kind of gender inequality especially within cycling. It's important to make sure all the doors are open, making sure that events are welcoming. Entries are perhaps kind of assigned so that women have priority and not like all the men take all the spaces, for instance.
So yeah, I mean, I spoke at the National Cycling Show recently, and one of the other panelists was an event organizer, Ollie, who organizes, I think, Chase to the Sun. And he was discussing, this was one of the points that came up around entries, and should certain entries be ring fenced for anyone who's not male, essentially. But okay, that's one discussion. But I think actually there's far more important things to be doing when you're event organizing or trying to open cycling up to women. I think, one of the biggest barriers to a lot of things is safety. Women feeling safe to cycle, whether that's out on the road or in an event. If your event goes into darkness, what kind of measures are you taking to make sure your female cyclists feel safe? It's fascinating. I think it's become more of a discussion now, but it's fascinating. Often when you talk to male friends or whatever, and they'll be like, well, why don't you just go for a run later? And you're like, because it's dark later. And they're like, I don't know. I don't get it. And it's the same for cycling. A lot of men, as a generalization, are not bothered by cycling in the dark or running in the dark. They kind of think that's fine. A lot of women will step away from that, not do it. So as an event organizer, it's kind of taking that into consideration, comfort breaks and toilet facilities in regards to both toileting, but also periods. Are period products available? Are there sufficient rest breaks and comfort stops that allow people to get stuff? And this is becoming more and more talked about in professional sports, but I think has yet to really trickle down to grassroots. And a lot of it really boils down to just ask. Like, if you're a male event organizer with a predominantly male team, ask your female entrants or ask the women around you, like, what would make this more appealing to you? What would make it safer? What would make it healthier? What would make you want to sign up? We can tell you, and then all you have to do is put it in place. But it's the asking. And I think that's really important. And then that goes across from gender to making things accessible for disabilities. people often don't mind being asked, how can we make this better for you? And then that information's there and we can improve everything.
Yeah, I guess there is the aspect of you don't know what you don't know, and if you're not curious, or if you're not open-minded, then that's kind of you don't ask those questions. And I think especially nowadays with for instance, when I look at different disciplines within cycling, look at road cycling or mountain biking or gravel racing, gravel riding, I feel like looking at these type of events, I feel like gravel, because of its growth in kind of in the now in this age where people are aware, are asking questions. There is a kind of the level that they are organizing events and catering to both men and women is much better suited to what I think is necessary to deliver for an event than for other events within, whether road racing, whether it is sportive, and so I think it's also because there is not so much of a legacy with gravel, because it's a new discipline. People can shape it, and there's a lot of women organizing gravel events, and they bring that awareness, and they kind of make it their point to make it inclusive, build trust, so that more women can come to the sport and feel that they are being respected, and are being catered to as well. So I think that I guess it's because of resonating with what you said about making sure that they're asking the questions to the women that are taking the part in the event, but also trying to actively address it, not just sit on your hands and hope nothing will happen or nothing will come out of it. I mean, kind of any people will start complaining. That's what I meant.
I think it's interesting though about gravel not having that same legacy, and it's like legacy doesn't give you a license to sit on your ass and not change stuff, right? And gravel having more female or non-binary kind of organizers, cool, let's get some more of those in road cycling then. Like if we know that's the answers, let's do it. And let's take action. Like one of my favorite ways for people to take action, and when's the best time to start? The best time to start is now. Now take action is a good old question. You're going to do an event or you're thinking about doing an event, email those organizers and ask them the questions. Ask them, are you going to supply this? Is there this being thought about? Do you need any more advisors on this? Can I contribute? A big bugbear for me is people that will kind of attend an event or participate in something, but they don't want to give, they don't want to be part of it, they just want to whinge about it. It's like, no, step up to the plate, offer your assistance, be brave, say, I know about this, I know about periods because I got one, I can help here, like it's cool, I don't need to be a period specialist, I just have been using tampons for a long time, I can do this. Like, you don't need to be a doctor, you can just offer your advice. And then that way, NASA will not send astronauts to space for like 3 weeks with like 400 tampons. Like, this is the way forward, guys. We just step up, we offer help where we can, we don't mansplain, and we don't just rely on legacy and be like, oh, I can't change it because it's always been that way. I think there's a lot we can change as ordinary people.
Right. Oh yeah, I think I can't. I think I will leave that to sit.
I feel like this is not where the conversation was originally going, and now we're here. You're like, oh.
I mean, this is the beauty of it. I was taking this conversation in that direction. I wasn't planning on talking about events specifically, but as a woman entrepreneur, as founder, my conversation was always going to go there.
But it's everything
But
too, right? Like, so all this stuff we're talking about, you can contact Rafa, you can contact Nicole, and you can say, what are you doing on sustainability? Like, can you show me the evidence of the claims you're making? Oh, I see you've launched X jersey and you're using this. Can you tell me more about that? And it doesn't have to be a complaint or a confrontation. Like, you're just asking for information. And as a consumer, you're entitled to that. You fund their business. Literally, without you, that doesn't exist. So by asking questions, we can kind of push on this stuff more. And then you can share that information, good or bad. You can promote things that you think are valuable to be shared, but it's really about taking action as a person.
Definitely. It's and I wanted to, I mean, it's brilliant that this conversation came to this point, because it is where it's really actionable actions that people listening in, myself, can take, because it will help move the needle in the right direction.
Right.
And it's simple things, but it sometimes cannot be that. Sometimes it's not like in front of your eyes. But I don't know. I'm my perspective, I try to be open, I try to be curious, but sometimes topics I'm blindsided because I don't have that experience, but I try to find out. I'm trying to be curious, and that's how you learn. That's how you asking questions, speaking with people who have different experiences and perspectives. That's how you learn. That's how you grow. So I think that, and this is kind of the whole motto of the podcast, is to take people on a learning journey. So it's brilliant. I wanted to kind of frame what we've been discussed, because I think there's important lessons that you have been sharing and advice, and I wanted to ask you, what would you say to the next generation of women coming up, kind of wanting founders, entrepreneurs that are just that they have an idea and they're just starting out? What would you tell them?
I think in terms of age, the next generation are sorted and they probably don't need my advice at all. Like, they seem like so switched on, they're asking, and they're not even asking, they're demanding better from brands.
Yeah.
And I think that will probably filter into their own careers and their own businesses. But I think, as a generalization, if you're just about to start your business, I think whether you're going for investment or not, writing a business plan can be really useful to just really flesh out your idea. I also think if you can access a kind of incubator or any kind of scheme where you can get help and support from business advisors, other businesses in a similar space on the same journey as you, it can be really beneficial. We've recently done one as the Long Run Club. We did First Tracks, which was the first kind of cycling based incubator of its kind, and allowed us to it's been an amazing thing. We got to go to Glen Tress as well, which was beautiful. So if you have never heard of Glen Tress, you should Google it. It's in Scotland, and it's amazing mountain bike and cycling hub. It's really gorgeous. I got to keep going up there for coffee, which I love. But it basically allowed us to work with kind of business advisors and really kind of go back to the beginning of our business and assess, who is your customer? We've always known our core mission, but is that succinct, and are we able to communicate it efficiently, and all these things? Because sometimes when you're starting a business, you need to be making sales or running the actual business, but then these bits can get forgotten. So I think if you've got the time and space, if today is the day you start your business because we've told you to, then this is step 2, is actually maybe write a business plan. And if you're like, oh my God, I don't know how to write a business plan, that's cool. You can get a framework online, but also it doesn't have to be some kind of formal document. It's more about making yourself think through the questions and the processes to be like, do we really need 3-wheel bikes? Like, is that a thing that I see a market for? Rather than kind of running full pelt into something and then getting down the line, you can kind of just avoid some of that stuff. So I think, yeah, sitting down, be honest with yourself, and then
Mhm.
don't take advice from anyone that you don't admire. So when you're starting a business, everyone's got an opinion. And I think it's very easy to go, oh, my idea is no good because they've said it's no good or they don't understand it. And it's actually like, yeah, but do you really kind of in this specific thing? Like, I respect my mum, but I'm probably not going to take her advice on cycling. It's like, you know, is
Yeah, yeah,
this thing, is this someone that you need to take advice from? And if you don't have anyone in your life that kind of fits that, where you're like, yes, I would really respect and value their opinion, then go out and ask. You'll be amazed by the amount of people you can just contact on LinkedIn and say, can I please come on your podcast? And can we have a great conversation? And then I'll be like, yes, we can have a great conversation. But also you can, you know, say, look, I'm going to start this business. Can I just have 2 minutes of your time to ask you X, Y, and Z? And people are generous. You'll find support.
yeah. Very good. Yeah, it's precisely. It's seeking out the if you want to that advice, there are a lot of people that are more knowledgeable than you are in those specific fields, and seeking out those people is key to your own success. To the point that you mentioned early on in the conversation about having a co-founder or surrounding yourself with experts, with the management team that is good at what they do, is what will differentiate a success from a failure, perhaps. Um, and we've been talking about cycling, and you have mentioned a lot of things that should be changed, that could be changed about it. And I'm kind of curious to find out, with your learnings from the Long Run Club, the process that you put in place to make it more ethical and sustainable. If you had a magic wand, what would you change about the cycling industry if someone gave you that power? What would you change?
Oh, now the power's gone to my head. I've only had it 2 seconds. I'm like, oh, what can we change? I think on a higher level, it would be having more voices in cycling from more different experiences. And we've discussed that, but
Yeah.
I think if I'm looking at a different perspective, one thing I see, and I guess it's not specific to cycling, but it's very prevalent in cycling, is an attachment to brands for the kudos that people feel those brands bring. There's kind of this weird elitist thing of like, I find a lot of cyclists very much want to be attached to certain brands because they really strongly believe that the connotations of that brand message then reflect on them, which, don't get me wrong, I run a brand, so I get it. Like, it's my bread and butter of is putting a message through a brand that a consumer
Exactly.
understands. But it's almost at another level in cycling. Like, so here's a really interesting story. Recently, we had someone come to us. They're putting on a corporate cycling event together. And they were like, oh, we want to buy Rafa jerseys. Can you guys put our logos on them? And we were like, well, no, on lots of levels, because
Yes.
no. But also I was like, technically it's a really bad idea. I was like, because the way you would do that is heat press, and heat press onto a stretch fabric is never good because it's essentially like prick sticking onto something you're going to then pull apart. It doesn't really like it. You can do it, but it won't last. It'll look a bit bad, blah, blah, blah. And so, they were umming and ahhing. And then essentially they decided to go with the Rafa jerseys anyway, because he really wanted Rafa jerseys. And I was like, so it's not the best choice. You're going to have to go along and do extra steps to make this happen. And sustainability wise, it's not great as well. But you've done it because you're dead set on wearing a Rafa jersey. Now, fair play to Rafa, because they've done a blinding job there of convincing someone that this is the best option. But it's just fascinating to me that it was more important to him to be seen to be wearing a certain brand than it was to get the best kit for the job. And I think it's that I would like to change in cycling, of like, actually, can we all just be a little bit less egotistical about our brands and a bit more find the joy of cycling rather than what you feel cycling says about you. That's the bit I would magic one change.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I'm thinking about it now, and at one level, that kind of what that story tells you is that what tells me, is the power of brand, the power of brand communications, as you pointed out. The second is that sometimes you are kind of blindsided to what you're actually purchasing, and if you are actually really concerned about where your kind of footprint is in the earth, then you really need to look at the options you buy, look at what choices you make.
But also, I don't get what they felt they were gaining, because, okay, that jersey standalone probably performs really, really well. But I, as a designer with over 10 years experience at the highest levels, then said to him, but by doing these extra steps, you're going to compromise the performance and blah, blah, blah. And they chose it anyway. So he's telling me he's not choosing it for performance anymore. He's not choosing it because it's the best sustainability and his impact on the world. So he's only choosing it because he wants that to say something about him to other people that can read it.
Exactly.
So that's the interesting, that's the thing for me, is like, when did that become a thing?
But it's, I mean, I come from a marketing background. I have a bit of experience in branding. The power of brand is able to shape perceptions, and that sometimes obfuscates what the real value you're gaining from wearing that piece of kit, wearing that brand. But you really, and that's kind of where I think being really questioning the way what you said about asking questions as your right as a customer, as a consumer, asking the questions about the brand, what your credentials, because that then informs you. But that is obviously it kind of requires a different level of commitment from the consumer, which, I mean, when we look at Gen Z consumers, they want and they value a brand that is ethically sourced, follows and has environmental credentials that resonates with them. And so there is here as well generational kind of difference and divide, where you have younger generations that are much more educated, are much more what is the word? I don't want to say critical, but are much more pragmatic about what they wear and what they buy. And as you said, like they know what they want, and they're not afraid to demand it.
Yeah, we definitely should be taking a leaf out of their book. But I think as well, it comes to, purchasing a cycling kit is very rarely a cheap purchase. I mean, quite often it's quite expensive. And you maybe have done your research in terms of performance. I know a lot of people that will spend a long time looking at reviews and YouTube videos to kind of find the best thing. So I don't think it's really too far a leap to then continue and kind of ask those questions around, okay, cool, I've seen that you perform the best, but are you sustainability wise the best as well?
Exactly.
And there's no perfect brands. I think that's important to caveat. I'm not criticizing any of the brands that are doing good work. I think where we need to criticize is the brands that are giving the marketable impression that they're doing work that they are not doing. And that's when we need to question, what does this term really mean? Where has this really come from? And we will see more laws and legislations coming in. Europe already brought some stuff in. We'll see it coming in. But I don't think we should have to rely on that to make us ask and question these things.
I wanted to, we talked about, we touched on about failure. And I think I wanted to draw on your experience as a runner. You mentioned about that experience of where in that race midway through the evening where you lost signal and you were like, right, what do I do now? And that seems like a challenge that really kind of took you to an extreme. Has that type of challenge taught you something important that you use on your day-to-day life?
Yeah. So I think what you're referring to is the spine race.
That's correct.
Where I was in the middle of the Pennine Ways in bogs at 11 o'clock at night, pitch black, no phone signal. I did have a safety tracker, but I didn't want to press it because I was like, there's nothing actually wrong with me. I'm just a bit lost. But I think what I really learned very quickly during that period was that I was going to have to sort it out for myself. You know, I was kind of in the dark. There was no one around. And I was like, okay, well, you're going to have to figure this out yourself, which is quite rare nowadays. You know, we've always got our phones like, oh, I'll ring someone with this problem. But I do think in business as well, becoming someone that's able to quickly solve things yourself is a real asset. And so I take that through now. But also I kind of think I've been lost in the dark in the Pennine Ways and, you know, I managed to get out alive. So I'll be fine and just crack on with the next thing. So yeah, I think anything like that where you've overcome a challenge. And I mean, let's be honest as well. That was a play challenge. Yes, I could have got hurt, or something serious could have happened. But realistically, I would have pressed my buzzer and the lovely young guys that eventually found me would have come and got me quicker. There are people with real challenges and real things to overcome. And those people go on to do amazing things as well. So I think you have to reflect and look at your own challenges and find strength there. But you can also look at the other achievements other people have done and kind of use those as a source of inspiration.
Talking about inspiration, is there any woman in sport or in business that inspire you?
Oh God, all of them. I am obsessed with female business leaders and sportswomen. I have an office. You can't really see on the video, but the right side of my office is all England Lionesses signed. I have a boxed Barbie of Mia Hamm because she was my idol growing up. She's an American football player or soccer player. And when I was growing up, they made nothing that was kind of like women. I'm so jealous because my daughter is growing up in a world where there's so much merchandise with female sports players on. But when I was young, really rare. And they made this Barbie. She doesn't even look like Mia Hamm, but she's the Mia Hamm Barbie from the World Cup. And so when I had an achievement, I purchased that from eBay. I've also got next to her the Barbie from the Tokyo 2020 Olympics that didn't happen with the skateboarding when they had that, the female Barbie. But yeah, and then I just find women in business and sports so incredible because you're accomplishing so much by just by being there.
Exactly.
You're really pushing those boundaries by having the bravery to walk into a boardroom or onto a pitch, to start, to not leave, to persevere, and then to achieve is all just incredible. So yeah, my entire office is surrounded by female athletes, female businesswomen as well to keep it going when the fires are igniting in the email box and you're starting to panic.
Thanks for sharing. I mean, I was going to ask you if you were going to name one or three, but I think it's the way you have answered the question just speaks to the challenges that many women entrepreneurs, sportswomen, find themselves in trying to be at the top level. So I think just acknowledging all of their efforts, all of their kudos, all of their work. It's important. And with that, I wanted to bring kind of our conversation to a question that I ask of all my guests, which is, what does success look like to you?
The pressure of knowing the questions come in and that it's such a big question. But I think I've lost this one because I thought about this earlier and I was like, what does success mean to me? And I think it means a lot of things, but with the long run club, I think it means going out of business. So I think for us, it's creating a culture and disrupting the cycling industry so much that people don't feel the need to have an event jersey at every event, that they keep those jerseys longer, and therefore we start to lose our customers. That people realise we don't need a new bit of kit all the time, that we can reuse what's already on the planet, and therefore we don't start producing jerseys for new things when maybe they're not needed. And maybe that means we don't go out of business. Maybe that means we evolve and we become a repair service or a rehousing service. But I would love to think we have the level of impact that makes real change. And on a minor level, I always like to think about today, because that's in the future, right? That's down the line. What does success mean today? And I think if you are listening to the podcast on the day it's released, or, you know, years in the future, but that day is the day that you take your first action, whether it's start your first business or your new business, take up a new sport, get the bike out of the shed, email a company to ask them something. But I would love to think that the success of this time we've spent together today is actioning people into doing something.
Brilliant. I think, well, that is a call to action from Lily. Please start something. Make that first step. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, with the kind of the vision that you have and what success looks like for a long run club, it's a difficult thing to face, but I think from what our discussion, if anything, reveals from that, is that that's what you are working towards having people understanding that their choice makes an impact in the world, and by sourcing the correct kit, it doesn't have to be discarded every season. There's a life that you can retain it, and you can recycle if you need to. But there is an element of kind of there's an element of kind of lasting, rather than just being something that is for that year, as you said.
Definitely. Having pride in the longevity of our kit. I think there are other cultures like climbing that do that much better than we do in cycling. And I'd love to see that as something that moves forward of, I've had this jersey 10 years. Look how great it still is.
Brilliant. So it comes now to the point of the podcast where every guest is left a question by previous guests. And the question that was left for you is the following. Where is your favorite place to ride?
Oh, well, as we've covered, I'm not a competitive cyclist. So I'm very lucky I live in Scotland, and there are many, many beautiful places around here. But I would say my favourite place to ride is a place called Strathclyde Park, where they have an old car park that they changed into a bikeability area. And the reason it would be my favourite place, it's on the side of a beautiful loch, but this old car park as a bikeability area means my kids will confidently cycle round. So then I can cycle without having to deal with the branch on the floor, the puddle or the swirl that's then meant they've frozen in fear. So anywhere that's kind of a safe space. But we're spoiled for choice up here.
Really? I think that's a very, very important answer, because it's important to allow safe places to exist so that children can grow to love to ride their bikes, and see it as a way to express themselves, gain freedom from the parents eventually. It's a great way to grow and learn.
I'm hopeful that in 2 or 3 years we can do another podcast. You can ask me the same question and I'll be able to tell you about all these amazing places we've taken them on their bikes, because they no longer need to kind of be in this safe space. Yeah. But for now, that's where we're at.
Very good, very good. So it now comes to the point where it's your turn. What question would you like to leave to my next guest?
Oh, I think we should ask them to tell us about a positive action they've taken to improve cycling.
Brilliant. That is a brilliant question. I think it's quite a difficult question, but is it a good question? A good question to ask, and kind of allows you to reflect deeply on what actions are really meaningful and can have an impact. So yeah, thanks for sharing that question.
Sorry to the future guest.
Well, who knows? Lily, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, getting to know you more, your purpose, and I think this is one of these episodes that is packed really with actions that people can take and really break it down into their lives so that they can just do the next thing that they are afraid of, and also just to kind of allow them to make better choices in the kit that they think of in the future when they are thinking of purchasing, because I think that's what is at the core of what you do, is educating people to make the best choice. And you have one of the best choices when it comes to ethically sourced, environmentally friendly kit. So yeah, thanks for sharing your story and your purpose with us.
No worries, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Massive thank you to Lily Rice for sharing her grit, insight and contagious fire with us. If this episode made you think differently about success, sustainability, or what it means to be strong, I have a huge favor to ask you. Please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you love these conversations, make sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and join us on this journey to a more creative, active, and purpose-driven life, all powered by the bike. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep riding to your own success.